Hi all, welcome back to K Club Week 7. Today we are going to discuss your budget and budget justification, your plans and statements of mentor and co-mentors, and your mentor and co-mentor bio sketches and how you need to edit them for your particular project. And last but not least, homework. So in terms of K application sections, for research, today we're covering budget and budget justification, highlighted in red here. And for career, we're doing the plans and statements of mentor and co-mentors, which is max 6 pages. Again, I'll remind you of the page limit later. Don't worry too much about that at this point. And then the NAH bio sketches for your mentor and co-mentors. So today we are channeling Oprah. You're going to get all the money that you need for your budget. Let's actually make your budget. So make sure you know based on your FOA how much you have to spend for each year of your grant. Talk to your university's grants office or grants person and see if they have a budget template for you to use and fill out. So at the top here we have the activity code or K mechanism, particular K grant, the minimum effort required for that particular grant, the salary cap, research cost cap, the maximum award, and the typical duration of the award. So this is for NIMH listing the different Ks, the percentage effort you need for your budget, and the salary cap for your budget. So for the R00 phase, the total cost allowed is $249K a year across centers. So this amount includes your salary, your fringe benefits, which is comprised of the cost of your health insurance, vacation sick days, and pension, research costs, travel costs, and indirect costs. So your university's facilities and administrative costs reimbursed at 8% of your total direct costs. And if you're like, what does that mean? We're going to go through an example in terms of calculating these indirect costs. Let's talk base salary. Talk with your primary mentor and your grants office person about how to estimate your base salary. That may involve a negotiation. So at library, you'll have to negotiate with the president of library and the chief operating officer of library to come up with what this will be in your budget, along with your primary mentor. So your base salary will be multiplied by your university or institute's fringe rate. And library's fringe rate is 25% to get the total fringe rate per year. So how much of my time or effort do I need to put in my budget? For K99, you need to have a minimum of 9 months or 75% full-time professional effort specifically devoted to this project. So for my K99 example here, I am doing secondary data analysis of fMRI data. I need to devote 75% of my time to this project. For my R00, I have to designate a minimum of 9 months, again, 75% full-time professional effort, but this time does not all have to be specifically devoted to this project. So for my R00 phase, I was working on becoming an assistant professor somewhere and setting up my EEG lab. I need to devote 75% of my time related to these research and career goals, but it doesn't all have to be, if you're an assistant professor somewhere, you're going to have other teaching duties. So it's not reasonable to think that this will be your only thing you're doing during this time. In terms of other allowed budget items for K99 and R00, tuition and fees related to career development are allowed. And make sure any classes, workshops, etc. listed in your training plan are budgeted in here. Any research-related expenses such as supplies, equipment, and technical personnel, such as research assistants. So you can designate in your budget payment for research assistants, as well as buying like an EEG system, for example. You can include participant payment costs, but make sure the number of subjects matches the number listed in your approach section in terms of how many subjects you propose to enroll in your study, and your planned enrollment table. And we'll get to that planned enrollment table down the line. Your budget can include travel to research meetings or training. Make sure all of your travel listed in your training plan is covered in your budget. They have to match. Statistical services, including personnel and computer time. So if your university has a supercomputing center and you want to farm out your data analysis to be processed on that, make sure to include it in your budget. If you have a statistical consultant on your grant, make sure you budget for their time here and contact them and ask their hourly rate. Again, other consultants, unless they already work at your university. So for example, I may be a consultant on LIBOR K99R00 projects, but I am not getting paid because I already work at LIBOR. So I won't be involved in that budget. So again, salary for mentors, secretarial, and administrative assistants is not allowed on this grant. So your mentors can't get any money from the K. For K99R00, you create a budget for each year of the 5-year grant. Luckily for you, you only have to provide a justification of your budget for the K99 phase, so years 1 and 2. Let's look at an example K99 year 1 budget I made up. Then we can create a document to justify this budget. So at the top, I have base salary, calendar months, requested salary, fringe benefits, which is 25% times your requested salary, and total requested. So we can see in the first row for senior key personnel, that's your base salary you determined with the powers that be is $80,000 a year. So then you calculate 9 calendar months at $80,000 a year. And that comes up to be $60K in requested salary on this grant. You're going to multiply $60K times 25%, and you're going to get $15,000. So your fringe benefits on this grant will be $15K. So you add your requested salary plus fringe to get your total requested salary, which is $75K. It turns out, if you look on the right of the table, the max NIMH salary is $75K, so that works out perfectly. It's important to note that the max research you can spend is $20K per year, so that means your direct cost cannot be more than $95K. Let's keep going with this budget. So let's say for other personnel, postdocs, grad students, undergrads, again, you can't put secretarial stuff on this budget, but let's just say for the purposes of this K99 year 1 grant, you don't have any other personnel. You're not hiring RAs, and you're not getting any equipment. So in my own example, I'm doing secondary data analysis of fMRI data. So I don't need to collect more data. I don't need any equipment to process the data. I'm set. Let's say that I plan 5K domestic travel. So I'm going to go to Society of Biological Psychiatry conference and maybe a couple other regional conferences, but I'm not going out of the country. Participant trainee support costs, including tuition. Let's say all of the classes that I'm taking are covered with LIBOR's affiliation with TU. So I do not need to pay any tuition for classes. Other direct costs, materials and supplies. I want 1K to go to a new laptop, and I want to have 2K go to publishing costs. So there's a lot of open access journals that cost money to publish in. So I want to have that money, 2K, available for when I'm trying to publish my fMRI secondary data analysis paper. Consultant services, so say I'm hiring a statistician to help me do the analyses, and it ends up being 2K for the first year. Let's say that I decide to have a research assistant to start setting up my EEG equipment, and they're going to work part-time, so that'll be 10K. Other project costs, I have nothing else, and so my total direct costs, if I add up everything on my grant, including my salary and everything in the last column, it ends up being $95,000. And I know that my max direct cost can't be more than $95K, at least when I'm applying for my K through NIMH. Then I'm going to multiply 95K times 8% to figure out my indirect costs. And that ends up being those are costs that go to LIBOR if I'm applying at LIBOR. That turns out to be $7,600. Then I multiply my directs plus my indirects to get my total direct and indirect costs. So even though direct costs can't be more than 95K, it's okay for the total cost in your budget to be more than that because you need to account for these indirects. The next step is justifying each expense in a separate document. So what do you need to include in this budget justification for this example? Personnel. So the calculation of your salary, the mention that your primary mentor and co-mentors are unsalaried and that what their roles in the project are, but that they're not getting any money from your budget. Materials and supplies, so the laptop, who's going to use it? Me, and what's it for? Secondary data analysis, and $1,000. Publication costs, what are these costs for from the journal, and how many papers can you cover with these costs each year for $2,000? In my case, I know the place I want to publish the paper is open access, and it costs $2K just for one paper, so I'm going to say that. Domestic travel, so give details related to the cost of each trip and where the trip is. Is it related to didactics travel or conference travel? And let's say I'm going to try to go to 3 conferences, one being SWP, which is included in my training plan. Consultation fees, so explain the calculation of these fees based on the cost of the consultant per hour and how often you will meet with a consultant. So you want to make sure your math is right and matches your budget. The last 2 things to include in your budget justification are facilities. So in line with NIHK guidelines, the budget requests indirect costs that are funded at 8% for the grant proposal. So if your research is done at LIBOR facilities gets 8% of your direct costs, and that is termed indirect costs. Lastly, institutional support. So you need to outline that full salary support for you and any additional assessment staff for the project will be provided by your university if it's beyond this budget. Your university will also provide you with the necessary space and physical resources to complete the proposed research project. So for example, your own office space, access to any other sort of resources you need to complete your project. So that's all budget, and we're going to move on to mentor and co-mentor statements. Again, this is 6 pages max, but you can worry about the word limit later, and I will remind you. Hopefully your mentor isn't just a laid-back entertainer. Your primary mentor needs to have the following info in their statement. They need info on their research qualifications and previous experience as a research supervisor. They need to describe a plan describing the nature of the supervision and mentoring that will occur during the K-99 award period, including how your scientific and professional independence will be promoted. They need to describe the elements of the planned research training and career development, including any formal coursework. So this has to line up with what is in your training plan. They need a plan for transitioning you from the mentored phase to the independent phase, so from going K-99 to R00, and a description of how your primary mentor will help you achieve scientific independence. They need to include a statement identifying components of the proposed research that you, the K-99 applicant, can take when you transition to research independence, and that can be part of your independent R00 phase award. They also need to write a statement affirming any resources and reagents that can be taken by you to the independent phase of the award. So again, you may be writing the first draft of this statement, and then your mentor will fill in the gaps and edit it. We're going to keep going with primary mentor. So the mentor should have sufficient independent research support to cover the cost of the proposed K-99 research project in excess of the allowable cost of this award, and should state that the needed costs will be covered. So for example, you just made your budget. The max direct costs are $95K. Say you need additional money for a particular type of equipment that you cannot fit in the K-99 budget. If your mentor is going to provide you access to the equipment or use of the equipment, primary mentor needs to say that in this statement. And if any funds are needed beyond what will be provided by the mentor, the source of additional funds should be identified and documented in a letter signed by the responsible individual. So for example, let's say you need some other sort of equipment or access to computing services that can't be covered by your budget, but the psych department where you do your research will cover the costs. That person needs to write a letter on your behalf. And the mentor must state that they will write and provide annual evaluations of your progress for the initial mentored phase as required for the annual progress report. So for K-99 years 1 and 2, they need to provide yearly updates to NIH. The mentor must also agree to assist you in transitioning to an independent research position by guiding you during the job search and negotiation process and by commenting on the R00 phase application. The mentor must provide evidence of expertise, experience, and ability to guide you in the organization, management, and implementation of your trial or experiment or whatever you're doing to help you meet timelines. So let's get to co-mentorship teams. So the co-mentor statements will likely be shorter than the mentor statement. So they need to list info on their research qualifications and previous experience as a research supervisor, a plan describing the nature of their supervision and mentoring that will occur during K-99, including how your scientific and professional independence will be promoted. So again, the co-mentors are supposed to help you separate from your primary mentor. So this needs to be clearly outlined how they'll help you do that. They need to describe their role in the didactics, coursework, and mentoring, and have a plan for transitioning you from the mentored phase to the independent phase. So how are they going to help you go from K-99 to R00? And how will you achieve scientific independence? How will they help you do that? They need to also show evidence of expertise, experience, and ability to guide you in the organization, management, and implementation of your research and help you meet timelines. So the K-99 R00 goals and the activities mentioned in your candidate plan for career development and training activity section need to be covered in these sections of your mentor and co-mentors. They need to match up. How will your mentorship team help you achieve these goals and promote all the activities outlined in your training plan? You will likely be writing the first draft of these sections again for your primary mentor and co-mentors because you want to make sure everything in your training plan matches what you have in these statements. That's not such a bad thing, so you can make sure that these mentor statements match up with what you've already written. If you start out with a mismatch, it's harder to track. So you want to match these up. And then if your mentor wants you to change things, then you'll know you have to change them in the plans and statements of mentor and co-mentors, as well as your training plan. I recommend asking your mentor and co-mentors whether they want you to edit their Section A of their bio sketches to reflect their roles in your K application, or if they will do it. So you want to make sure that the following topics are covered in their bio sketches Section A. They need to say that they have a track record of training and experience in rigorous and unbiased experimental design, methodology, analysis, interpretation, and reporting of results. They need to say that they have taken efforts to enhance diversity in the biomedical research workforce and to ensure the research environment is inclusive, safe, and supportive for trainees of all backgrounds. They need to show commitment of fulfilling the need of the trainees to complete their training in a timely fashion with the skills, credentials, and experiences to transition into independent careers in the biomedical research workforce. So all of these things need to be covered in Section A of your primary mentor and co-mentors bio sketches. For action items this week, revise your career development and training plan section based on your primary mentor feedback. Then write a draft of your budget and budget justification and plans and statements for mentor and co-mentors and get feedback from your primary mentor and co-mentors about these sections. It might be helpful to send your mentorship team your budget, your training plan, and your plans and statement sections all at once and remind them that certain things need to match up across all 3 documents. Finally, ask your primary mentor and co-mentors about edits to their NIH bio sketches. They might want to make them themselves, or they have assistants that help them do that sort of stuff. So check in with them and see what they say. And I'll see you next week.